All right, well then let's call this to order. Calling the Regional Housing Partnership Executive Committee to order for our Wednesday, April 28th, 2021, 2 p.m. meeting. Is there a disclosure I need to make, Christine, about being virtual?
Yeah, I can read it. If you want me to read it, I have it up.
Please do.
The governor has declared a state of emergency due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership Executive Committee to assemble in a single location. This meeting will be held utilizing electronic virtual communication with the Zoom software application and in accordance with virtual meeting procedures and policies as outlined in item 4.0-01 of the Virginia State Budget, House Bill 29, as effective April 24th, 2020. The meeting will be recorded and made available to the public at www.tjpdc.org.
All right, thank you. We are officially in order and with the right announcement for the ordinance. And number 2 on our agenda, comments from the public. Do we have anyone here today who has signed up or wishes to speak for public comment by raise of hand or chat? Not seeing anything in the chat. All right, then I'm presuming that is no on comments from the public. We will close comments from the public and move to our consent agenda. 2 items on there, February 24th, 2021 draft minutes and our monthly financial update. Christine, do we need to make any comments here about the financial update?
The only comment I have is on the P&L, there is a charge for professional development billed to this program that is incorrect, and that's something I'm having corrected with our finance department now. So the revised P&L would have no professional development charge on that line item for March.
Very good. And does anybody on the committee have any changes or adjustments to make to the February 24 minutes? All right, seeing none and with the comment, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
All right, is there a second? There we go. We got a motion and a second. And were we doing voice calls for this or are we doing a collective aye? Apologize, not remembering. So let's just call the roll. I prefer to do that so everybody is on the record.
Would you like me to call the roll?
Please do.
Okay. Greg Powell,
Aye.
Ned Galloway,
Yes.
Anthony Harrow is not here. Colette Sheehy,
Aye.
Margaret Claire, and Brandon Collins.
All right, motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. All right, next on the agenda are project updates. Number 4, regional housing plan. And I don't see Anthony or Nick on the call. Were we expecting them to be here? Or has this missed several people's calendar today?
This may have missed several people's calendar. I can actually take this item though, so that we can move the agenda forward.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you guys received, as a part of the 162-page packet, a draft of the regional housing chapters for each of the jurisdictions. We are still working on drafting the overall regional summary chapter, but we did want to put the locality chapters in front of you all as soon as we could, with the caveat that it is still going through a revision process. So if there are errors, please just draw those to our attention and we'll make sure to work on those. I wanted to at least go through one of the chapters. I know you guys have seen this just through screen share before of what is in each of the chapters, but what we really like from this body is kind of like a good flip through to make sure that this is presenting the way that we said that it was going to present and that there's no feedback from you all. What I'm going to do as my next step after this body gives any feedback is I'm going to send this out in draft format with a draft watermark to each of the planning departments of the local jurisdictions, so they can then put first eyes on it and provide any feedback. Then this will go to the full regional housing partnership. Let me back up a second. You guys will first get to see the regional chapter. Once you guys approve, and we don't need any approval in this meeting today, but once you guys say, you don't have any other feedback for us, it'll go to the full regional housing partnership for them to recommend to the commission for approval. So that's the steps that we'll take for this document. I will also reach out to all of the jurisdictions to ask for their direction on how they would like this shared within their jurisdiction, whether it is something that the planning department, if they'd like us to present it to their boards, if they would like us to reconvene the initial steering committees that were convened at the beginning of the process. And when I hear back from the jurisdictions, we'll plan accordingly to make sure that we get this to them in the format that is most useful for them. So if okay with you guys, I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope I don't do what I did in the last meeting where I went through it without actually showing it to you. Can you guys see my screen? And are you able to see this aerial shot of Charlottesville?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to go through Charlottesville's chapter. As we shared with you guys previously, we have worked closely with the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County to embed the work that they're already doing into this regional plan. So I'm going to specifically show you Charlottesville's chapter. And then my ask of you all is, outside of this meeting, if you can do a flip through either for your individual jurisdiction or just as an overview and give us any feedback that you have on the elements that are in it. At this point, I doubt we would be adding any additional research or portions to the chapter, but we do want to hear from you all on what's currently in there. So each chapter begins with an introduction and how we're describing the housing continuum from homeless all the way through market rate. Then we do a background Charlottesville at a glance, giving some of the high-level statistics on the city. Again, we got a lot of this information directly from the jurisdictions. Next page is situation, and the newest copy does have numbers in here, but the next page is on the situation and opportunity as they're presented related to housing in each of the jurisdictions. And then can I just ask really quick, is the other Campo TJ PDC, is that Nick? Nick, are you on this call? Sorry, I don't see his name on there. All right, great.
Christine, this is David. It may be me.
Oh, great. Thank you, David. I just wanted to make sure that if there were any questions, we could direct them because Nick did the drafting, but I can answer. Next one is a summary of the community engagement that was done in each of the localities, which is different for each of the localities based on the level of work that they were already doing. The next one has some infographics on demographic data and housing related data. So there's a narrative summary at the top, and then there's a series of infographics. These have been revised several times with the Strategies and Analysis Committee. So they will also be seeing this in their next upcoming meeting as the final version based on their feedback. And then we have existing conditions related to housing and transportation. Initially, we just had this in and out data from the census on the map tool, but we decided to also include from the research that Anita did, looking at the cost of commuting to the major job centers in each locality, so that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're also looking at that drive till you qualify being an important thing to consider, that the further people are driving out, the more expense they have related to the transportation. We have existing conditions on current land use, on zoning for each of the 6 jurisdictions, as well as, excuse me, that was a very quick zoom. Give me a second. That's the second page of that, descriptions of each of the codes. And then we have a point in time zoning map. There was a lot of discussion in the Strategies and Analysis Committee of whether to include this or not, because it is such a point in time. And we know a lot of the jurisdictions are doing active work around their zoning. But we did feel, or that committee felt, that it was pretty important, even as a point in time, for people to be able to visualize the proportions in each of the jurisdictions that are zoned the way that they are. For folks that, a visual is much easier than reading it as text. So that is included. There is also a map that shows where multifamily zoning is permitted. Again, this is a point in time. A lot of this is changing, especially with the city of Charlottesville right now. Oop, gosh, this scroll is really excited when I'm in share. Sorry about that fast scroll. Here we go again. Here's what is permitted in each of those zones. So it's kind of a matrix for each jurisdiction. This was looking at their code as it currently exists. And then it discusses how we're looking at housing strategies relevant to the continuum. Excuse me. So all the way from strategies related to supporting those that are currently unhoused or experiencing homelessness, all the way up through strategies that can increase market rate, rental and home ownership. You guys have previously seen this. This shows the gap as identified in Anita Morrison's research that showed the gap of people that were experiencing either severe or cost burdens, homelessness, or substandard units. This is definitely one page that we will revise a bit. The Strategies and Analysis Committee, and Stacy, you're on there, others can speak to. There was a lot of discussion about what to include on the recommendations page and whether it was appropriate to prioritize recommendations for a jurisdiction. The committee felt pretty strongly that this should be more of like a best practice and available toolkit strategies that'll meet the needs, but that it was up to each local jurisdiction to determine their own priorities. And so these are not ranked in any prioritized manner. The committee also originally had a column for unit cost, and there was a lot of discussion around whether or not the unit costs were able to be backed up with enough data to support them, especially in an environment now where we know that costs are changing dramatically over time. And so the unit cost, it was determined, was pulled out, that it would take significant amounts of research and collection of data in order to be able to defend those unit costs. And so the committee made the determination to remove that from this table. So what they did settle on is the 2 bits of information that they'll provide, that this will provide alongside with the recommendation or the strategy, is what type of intervention is it and what time frame as a general rule it would take in order to implement that strategy. And then there is a recommendations page for each rung on the continuum, if you will. Going on through, and then it goes to the next chapter. The next steps for staff is we've worked with the committee to then identify what the elements of the regional chapter are going to include. And again, a lot of discussion was on whether or not we should be picking 3 to 5 strategies that can be implemented. So for example, provide additional resources to existing nonprofits that are doing work around affordable housing, or whether those 3 strategies should be how the region should address affordable housing, such as collaboration between jurisdictions in order to identify opportunities to work together. So we're gonna definitely come back to you guys and that committee with a draft, but I know Nick is still working on writing that right now. So that's not included in what's in front of you today. So with that, and not necessarily planning on giving that little presentation, I am more than happy to take questions, bring them back to the committee, any suggestions you have. I'm gonna stop my share so that we can all see each other. Does anybody have any first comments that they want to give just based on what you've seen to date?
Greg?
I think it's a superb package. I'm very impressed. My 2 questions I think have already been answered. One is how much input has each individual county been given. And I know that this is a bit of a straw man for some of the counties, at least I'm assuming that. And then it'll go out and hopefully you'll get response and edits and so on. I think it's important that you send the whole package so that they can see the context of their county with the others. And it helps strengthen the formatting so that they can recognize that, you know, the format is important to be consistent through all of the counties. There's some euphemisms and so on there that even I didn't understand, and some abbreviations that might, if it's going to be more layman oriented, you might want to fix. One I particularly like is soft density. Stacy, you want to explain that one? I think I know it.
I'm not entirely certain what that means either. I most often in the county, among the planners and developers, it's used to describe more middle density housing. That missing middle type of housing. So you want to increase the density, but not overwhelm existing communities. So it would be more infill, quadruplexes, small apartment buildings, those types of things. Looking at the workforce housing. That's the way I've heard it so far.
Okay. I noticed, by the way, on the lead-in for Charlottesville, it references Fluvanna a couple of times, which means the cut and paste didn't get thoroughly edited.
Yeah, and that's perfect. I saw, Colette, I saw your comment on that also. That's something that we have to go from page 1 all the way through and do that revision, and that's work that we're currently doing. But thank you. We will be looking at that.
So it's my understanding, for example, that Charlottesville, I'm guessing Brenda Kelly on the committee probably did her best through her consultants or herself to edit roadside Harwell study. And Stacy, I assume since you're writing the counties that section was heavily inputted already by you and probably others in the county. Now, some of the other counties, as I say, am I right in assuming some of them it's a straw man that hopefully will get response?
I think there are varying levels of engagement from the jurisdictions. I know I can say, for example, Greene County is very much waiting on us to give this to them to figure out what direction they're going to go with their comp plan chapter. So they've already received a draft of this because they've been asking for it all along. And so I've been keeping them updated. Others, I think it will be entirely up to them what they decide to do with it once they get it. And I don't think all of them will adopt it as a part of a comp plan.
So could you let us know when the distribution happens? And I'll give you a specific reason. I'm working in Fluvanna County right now. I'm about to meet the community development director and the administrator, and I would love to reference this because
Certainly.
we're looking at doing affordable out in their county. And so it would be helpful to know that they would have seen it. And if there's some feedback, it would be interesting to know that too, because I can take the fact that we're going to deliver 120 units to them in their county as part of the way to leverage the report and the value of the regional effort.
Yes, I will let this committee know when I send it out. My goal was to do it by Friday. But that assumes that I'm going to get through the full revision of 150 pages by Friday.
I think
And Gretchen, I see that you reached out to help. I appreciate that. So if we can, we'll work with staff internally to get that done. And then I'll let you guys know once I've sent it along.
I think the regional section, obviously very important. It can be an overview, a summary of the whole region, certainly. But this committee was put together so that there could be regional actions to help in solving this problem. So I would hope that some of the recommendations would have that character to them. And so that it would be in part a guidance for this group as to further actions on a regional level. And I think it would be encouraging to each of the jurisdictions, particularly the smaller ones, if they knew that there was a regional effort, enthusiasm, resource to help them contribute to the solution.
All right, other questions at this time? Show of hand. So just so I understand the timeline, Christine, so we're getting it, it's kind of, we had a chance to do a quick reaction here, but then also you want our reactions again by, did we say that time frame, next meeting or?
No, next meeting, we're gonna bring to you the regional chapter. And then we will ask next meeting for you all to, let me think through this because this is something internally we've been struggling with a lot. We wish the full partnership meeting was 1 month later because we'd really like to get this on the June agenda for the full partnership so that we don't have to wait another 3 months before it's before them. But what we could do is we could have you guys take action in May to present a draft to the full partnership in June, knowing that there could still be revisions that need to occur since you won't get the regional chapter until next month.
I think that's important. I agree with you to get it out in June. I think there's nothing wrong with giving the broader board a draft and request their input. I think if it's just handed to them, that would be less effective and perhaps may even get a little whiplash. That's not the right euphemism, but you know what I mean. So I think at whatever stage we can get it out, and hopefully you can pressure the individual jurisdictions to by giving them a deadline saying that this is going to be more broadly published in June. So we would welcome your input by mid-May or whatever.
All right, very good. Any other questions here? Yeah, I did see Colette's thing about Charlottesville County. I mean, we're collectively referred to as Charlottesville enough that maybe we want the city referred to as the county every once in a while.
Yeah, we felt pretty strongly, like getting this all tied together and out to you guys. We knew we were putting this out with some errors like that, but we also felt like we could not wait another month to do a read through. So
yeah, sure.
Our apologies, and please excuse some of those errors. We will catch them as we do the revision.
No worries.
The work is very impressive. Don't be apologetic at all. It's not totally perfect yet. There's a hell of a lot of work. And I happen to know that by very few people. And I thank Stacy, and Brenda's not on the call. I know those are two of the very active people. And of course, the in-house staff with Christine, and I'm not sure who all else from your group. And it's amazing results with very little guidance. So thanks.
Agree. I think we all agree. I saw a lot of heads nodding there. The next, move us along here. The next item, number 5, speaker series. Stacy and Lucinda, you can give an update there.
Yeah, sure. We had our second session this month, so that was on the 15th. I believe that was last Thursday. I'm losing track of time being at home all the time. And that session dealt with an overview of the affordable housing pro forma. So really what goes into figuring out the budget for affordable housing projects and what makes or breaks them. So what items in that budget, developer's budget would make it possible to build affordable housing or not, and how deep a level of affordability can be reached. And it also discussed some barriers to constructing affordable housing, and ended, I do believe, with some recommendations on what local governments can do to help developers build affordable housing. The session was presented by William Park, the president of Pinnacle Construction. There were 55 attendees to that session. There's been about 15 people that have viewed the recording after the fact because they weren't able to make it. And we did have several people respond to the survey. I think there were about 6 that responded, so not a great number, but they all really liked the session. I think it scored 4.7 out of 5-ish, something like that. So it was well received. The session coming up this month will deal with transportation and housing, so the relationship between those two. That is scheduled for Thursday, May 20th. It will be more of a panel discussion. So we do have a commitment from Todd Littman, who works for the Victoria Policy Institute in Canada. We have reached out to Stephen Johnson with Jaunt, and we are looking to potentially put one more person on. There's a couple more people we're looking at that we haven't heard back from yet. So that will be this month. And we will wrap up the spring speaker series on June 17th, talking about equity and its relationship to housing and community. And that discussion, again, will be a panel discussion. It will be led by Siri Russell, the county's director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion for Albemarle County. She's working to pull together a panel of several different people. I'm not entirely certain who they are yet. We will be meeting in about 2 weeks to work through that session. And that's my update.
All right, thank you, Stacy. Our chair is online with us and on camera, so I'm going to ask for questions, but then I will go ahead and hand the
You're doing
gavel,
such a
so to
good
speak.
job, Ned. Keep it up.
Well, it looks like you're up for this next topic that we're arriving to, so it'll be a good point to hand off to. But I will finish up here. Any questions for Stacy at this point on the speaker series by raising a hand?
I would love to add that I think it's really telling. We had, what was it, over 50 people attend, and it was scheduled simultaneously with the Red Roof In session that they were doing with the Community Foundation to roll that out to the community. And they had almost 100 attendees. So the fact that 150 people at the same time were tuning in to learn more about, the initiatives for affordable housing, I thought that was great. We were concerned about whether or not we'd have a dip in participation, but we did not. So I thought that was great.
Stacy, can I ask a question of, kind of thinking if we're going to continue the speaker series, if the committee has really thought about whether we should continue the virtual format, and is that kind of more attractive and easier for people to participate in than bringing everybody to a central location and having to rent a room and, all of that stuff moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's advantages to both. We have discussed continuing the virtual series next fall, so through the end of this year. But I think there's some really good things that can happen when you bring people together in an in-person event. I know there are a number of people that I have spoken to, whether it's planning commissioners or nonprofits, employees, that they really like that in-person networking component of the in-person events. So definitely through the end of this year, we will continue virtually, and then we will reassess, see where we stand pandemic wise and whether or not we can all gather again next year.
Hopefully at the spring annual big get together, which is excellent for networking.
Well, and I think it could be things like this like a speaker series, as all the local governments try to figure out, do we completely return to normal or do we have some mix of what we've been doing? Your speaker series is an easy place, quote unquote, because there's no governmental regulations governing how that happens, to see how it works, how a live and a virtual participation could work. So hopefully that'll be explored as well, for what it's worth. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ned, for covering for me, and I apologize to everybody, but I live and die by my calendar, and for some reason it got deleted, and I looked at it and went, wow, I got a hole in my schedule. I'm going to go treat myself to lunch. And I'm sitting down having lunch, and Ned sends me a text and goes, hey, I'm going to be late. And I go, late to what? And so thank you for covering for me. It looks like you guys got all the hard stuff over, and the fun stuff is the round table. I will add just a little bit to the conversation we're having about the speaker series. I had breakfast this morning with William Park to thank him for participating, and he and some of the other speakers from the previous sessions just applauded how we did this and the turnout that we had. You know, we had over 50 some odd folks in both of the last two sessions, and they were making comments like, thought we were only going to talk, thought we were going to only talk to 2 or 3 folks. So keep it up. This is great. This is great stuff. Thank you. Strategic plan. I'm moving back up on the schedule. Whoever's sent me that text, thank you. That's probably Christine, right?
I
Thank you,
forwarded you the
Chris.
calendar invite. I think Lucinda sent you the text.
Got it.
Yeah, we're at number 6, the draft for the strategic plan.
Got it. So I'm trying to recalibrate my brain from lunch to this. So Christine, I'm going to ask you to help jog a few brain cells in my head on that. We were going to be talking about
Yep.
the possibility of engaging a firm, correct?
Yes, correct. Virginia Housing has a grant track that allows for up to $20,000 for housing related organizations to apply for grant funding to do a strategic planning process. And so I was thinking that the Regional Housing Partnership, we're due to go through a more formal process, engage more of the stakeholders, more of the community in trying to determine the direction of the partnership. That grant application is due at the end of May. So what I put in your packets is a request for proposal that I will put before the TJPDC Commission, along with a resolution for them to authorize issuing the RFP. And what we would like to do is actually twofold. So let me talk through this a little bit. Virginia Housing has 2 different tiers of grant. The first one is for strategic planning or succession planning. The second tier is for implementation. So to get grant support to help implement what you come up with in your strategic plan. But in order to get the tier 2 funding, you have to choose a pre-approved consultant from their list of consultants that they work with. So my thinking was that we may want to consider putting this RFP out to that list of consultants so that we can get proposals back from folks that could potentially see us all the way through the planning to the implementation and already know the organization well. So that's what I was thinking of doing for this. All I wanted to do for you all is to make sure that this was the direction that you wanted us to go, and to go ahead and get permission from the commission. And then we'll have all the documents needed that we need to apply by May 31st for that funding. And then we should find out within, I think it was 2 or 3 months, whether we're approved for that funding. So I'm going to share my screen really quick because I'm positive in a packet this large that most of us have not had the time to put eyes on. So I want to make sure that you guys understand what it is that this grant would give us. So the scope of work within the RFP would be for a consultant to do the following activities: a kickoff and strategic planning work group meeting. So we would have to have a specific group, whether that's you all as the executive committee, or if we wanted to identify another working group, they would be working directly with the consultant. The consultant would also be responsible for doing all of the community engagement. We could help with the organizing it, making sure we send out, a calendar invites and all of that, but it would be up to them to do focus groups, interviews, surveys of all 4 of the sectors of the stool, Keith. And then they would also do an existing conditions analysis, looking at what already exists in the region related to affordable housing, the affordable housing policies and plans that are coming out, our operational framework, the bylaws of the partnership, and then develop a strategic plan from that. The elements of the strategic plan that are on the screen that you see, A, B, C, D, those are prescriptive from Virginia Housing's grant. So in order to be eligible, the consultant would need to provide all of those following items in order for them to reimburse us for that work. Other than that, all I think we would need to decide, and I think it's on the agenda, Keith, is we would want to hear from you all whether or not, once we issue the RFP, if you would like that to be a staff selection, or if you would prefer to have a selection committee that looks through those proposals. And that's really, I think, the only direction we need from you all if you feel that applying for this grant makes the most sense for the partnership.
And the third option is the executive committee can look at it as a whole, correct?
No, because it's due by, oh, yes, you guys meet one more time at the end of May before the grant application is due. So what we could do is bring before the executive committee the recommended, who was selected out of those proposals, and have you guys say, yes, you approve of that. If you want the executive committee to be that, they would have to meet prior. They would have to meet again before the May meeting.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Any thoughts, folks?
I'm going to stop share so you guys can see each other.
Should we set up a subcommittee amongst the executive committee to take a look at this, or should we look at it as a whole body, as the whole executive committee, or should we allow the staff to proceed on their own? Any thoughts? I guess the first question is, do we feel we should do this? I guess is the first question.
So yes to that.
There you go.
I don't think, does everyone know the definition of a camel? It's a horse designed by committee.
Got it.
One of my favorite committee lines. I think staff are more than qualified to do this. I think for us to review it, if they like, certainly to approve it, makes a lot of sense. I think that part of the outreach, I found it quite effective having the entire board on that workshop as part of the input. It was a great team builder, I thought, for the board as a whole. And I think there was some useful input that led to the framework plan. And so I think that should be one of the steps to their outreach management and facilitation.
Completely
Anybody
agree.
else? Any other thoughts, folks? So sounds like we're leaning towards staff. One, yes. Two, having staff proceed with this and keeping us up to date in normally regular scheduled meetings. Does that sound like a fair approach, everybody? Thumbs up? Okay, nobody's saying no. I think that's the approach that we'll take, Christine.
If staff wants input, you can send an email, but I think you've got it.
So we'll bring back in the May executive committee meeting. I can do like a quick table summary of each of the proposals that we got and the one that we recommend, as well as attach that proposal so you guys can see that one in advance of the meeting.
So I'm following my chat messages here, and it looks like we're going to legislative next. Is that correct? Or did we already do that? And that is going to be David, correct?
Yes, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me?
So David, just before you jump in, just as a reminder to everybody, when we originally did our first strategic plan, we all designated that working together with the state would be a good thing. So this is kind of a coming full circle for David's presentation on this. So thank you, David. The floor is yours, sir.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and I think that I'm glad that y'all had this large packet for the meeting today. I'm glad that I did not include my 56-page slide presentation in your packet. So in lieu of that, I'm just going to go over a few things with you. And thank you for the opportunity to do that. Just briefly wanted to talk to you a little bit for those who are not familiar with TJPDC's legislative services. Just do a little overview of that. Talk a little bit about some of the statewide housing advocacy groups and efforts, and then just a few mentions of some legislation related to housing and affordable housing and some studies from the past, well, I guess year and a half or so. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm David Blunt. I'm the Deputy Director and the Director of Legislative Services here at TJPDC. The Legislative Services program here, I'll say is fairly unique among the regions of the Commonwealth. In that number of years ago, way before me, they decided it was important, the local governments in the region, that is, decided it was important to have some legislative advocacy on an ongoing basis. primarily at the state level. And that's what I've been doing for a number of years here. It's been very satisfying to work with our local government and local government officials here. As part of that process, yearly, I work with the local governments in the region to develop a regional legislative program. Our list of priorities for the upcoming General Assembly session, as well as some ongoing position statements. Several of the localities in the region likewise develop their own local legislative positions and priorities. The TJPDC has on a number of occasions in the past developed some regional initiatives to carry forward to the General Assembly, either as budget recommendations or bills. Most recently, we have jumped on broadband, which has certainly been a hot topic the past several years, and had some legislation introduced. Equal Revenue Authority for counties has been another one. I found that several of the localities in this region also have been very active, particularly in recent years, to have their own local initiatives and to ask the legislators to submit bills or budget amendments on their behalf. And sometimes my advocacy on their behalf with the legislators really takes up a lot, almost the majority of my time during the General Assembly session. I can tell you that back in 2020 with bills and some resolutions and budget amendments, I had a total of 20 pieces of legislation moving through the process at the beginning. Certainly caught a break this past year since there were limitations on the number of bills that legislators could put in. Only had a handful this past session, but the advocacy on behalf of local governments, it's really a year-round job. Monitoring these study committees that go on during the off season, and certainly working with the legislators not only during the session but year-round, working through the process that the Virginia Association of Counties and the Virginia Municipal League also have as they develop legislative platforms. And then again, working on those local initiatives. And that process has already started for 2022 session that will begin in January. And I actually have a meeting next week with staff over at Albemarle to talk about a couple of things. So that's just a quick overview of legislative services and how I operate in working with the local governments and for the local governments in the region. As far as housing advocacy at the state level goes, certainly, in addition to Virginia Housing, which has already been mentioned here today, and the Department of Housing and Community Development, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. The General Assembly does have its own standing housing commission that will study issues throughout the year that have been assigned to it, either by General Assembly committees or formal resolutions. Sometimes it'll even grab issues that have been discussed in committees. Maybe there was a bill that was not successful but got a lot of discussion. And they'll take those and work them through their process throughout the year. They use a number of work groups to do this. The Housing Commission is advocates, some local government folks, legislators. It's a pretty good group with some varying background and expertise. That commission just had its first meeting of the year last week, set their work plan for the coming 6-7 months. They're going to be looking more at the impact of evictions, talk about long-term affordability of housing issues, going to be looking a little bit more closely this year at land banks. But they meet regularly through those work groups in the full commission, and excuse me, really a good group to plug into. Doing the plugging into the Housing Commission also are some of the statewide groups I'm sure you're familiar with. Virginia Housing Alliance, strong advocate in Virginia for housing issues, also Housing Forward Virginia, and then the Virginia Poverty Law Center and the Legal Aid Justice Center also have a strong presence there. So, excuse me, I'm getting a tickle. So I think, in terms of being able to plug in to some of the folks who at a broader and more of a statewide effort are doing some of the things that you all are talking about, those are certainly some of the groups to interact with. I wanted to mention just a few legislative pieces of legislation and some legislative topics, I guess, from the past two sessions. Really more, excuse me, more activity during the 2020 session, I think, in housing than we had this past year with, some specific bills, I think, that were of importance to local governments related to affordable housing. During the 2020 session, there was a pair of bills that were backed, identical bills that were backed by the Home Builders Association. Worked with local governments on them, though, to really try to allow localities to adopt affordable dwelling unit ordinances that had a little bit more flexibility in some different areas than current code provisions allow. There's really three sections of the code that authorize these affordable dwelling units. There's the one that was passed in 2020. There's one that I'll mention in a minute that has been carved out for just a handful of localities. And then there's another more general law that applies to the rest of localities that has more prescriptive provisions in the code. But that was, I think, designed to be another tool in the toolbox for the local governments. Charlottesville was successful during that same session in getting added to the section of code that I think only 6 other localities had to give them even more flexibility with their affordable dwelling unit ordinance. Albemarle County also has the authority, and I think the rest are in Northern Virginia. There's a lot going on right now with some different studies related to housing. There was a resolution last year, 2020, requesting DHCD and Virginia Housing to look at ways to incentivize development of affordable housing. JLARC, which is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission that does research and policy analysis for the General Assembly, also received a directive from the JLARC Commission to look at housing needs. And then even during the 2021 session, there was another directive to DHCD to look at the construction of accessory dwelling units as a way to address the need for affordable housing. Also this past session, a number of eviction-related bills that kind of generally focusing on the terms by which landlords could evict tenants for non-payment, and what are the policies for payment plans, and really trying to encourage the use of the rent and mortgage relief program, I guess now the rent relief program. Those were probably the main topics from this past General Assembly session. Just a few other tidbits before I stop. You're probably aware, federal moratorium on evictions is going to be in place till the end of June. And then just a couple of items from a budgetary standpoint. The state budget that was approved by the General Assembly and enacted, I guess, earlier this month includes $3.3 million each year for eviction prevention and diversion programs. And of course, with our American Rescue Plan that was adopted at the federal level back in early March, has about $31 million in emergency rental and homeowner assistance funding. And I know there's different guidance on different programs that were part of the ARP or are coming out at different times. I want to say there has been some with regard to that program, but others we're still waiting, and probably another couple of weeks before we see some guidance on some of the other programs. So that's a quick and dirty. Hope that gives you an idea of a couple of different things. And again, thanks for the opportunity. Glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for David?
Yes, it's more of a question maybe for the committee than David, but maybe David could give some guidance here. I seem to recall at some executive committee meeting, we may have talked about, do we want to have a legislative meeting with legislators akin to what localities do? It seems to me that, when I think of Albemarle County, when we put our legislative packet together and had that meeting, we really have to identify like our top 2, 3, 4 priorities. And then we have a list of other things that don't get airtime in that meeting. And that would be the same for other localities. It could have power that this body might be ready, whether it's a legislative committee or the executive committee takes this on, where we meet with them and have our own legislative packet or priorities and get them together as a region that could have some sway or maybe some impact there. But I'm kind of throwing that out there to see what your reaction is, David. And then if there is something there, maybe the executive committee could discuss this at an upcoming meeting about what we could maybe do with it.
Yeah, I'm glad
Well,
to respond or defer.
Would you respond real quickly on your thoughts on that, David, if that makes sense for this body to do as Ned has described? I know when we did our charrettes in the beginning, that was my most surprising result of our conversation, that at the time it was felt that this body should try to take this task on. So I'd love to hear your response to that, David. And then we'll jump into Greg.
Yeah, sure. I think, certainly, as a way to, maybe first and foremost to establish a relationship if that needs to be established or strengthened with the legislators in this region, certainly I think could form a good educational tool for them about the work of the group, but also, the things that you're trying to do and things you're trying to support, to the effect that, that involves state policy and changes that may be desirable from a state regulatory or state statute standpoint. Sure. And I think particularly with Delegate Hudson's new to the General Assembly, representing Charlottesville and part of Albemarle County, has taken a particular interest in some of the housing issues. So yeah, I think I'm a big believer anytime you can establish a relationship and maintain a relationship with a member of the General Assembly and be able to provide them with information, that's a good thing.
Greg,
Thank you, David.
Want to mention something? I think so.
Sorry, I was just hoping that I could get people's attention for Colette before she had to sign off at 3. So everybody should take note of this kickoff tomorrow evening to do with the university's affordable housing initiative. And a note was sent out to all of you with a link to register. I think they're a big part of the solution, and they're trying to be a big part of the solution. So I was just going to hope that she could speak to it before she left, but she had at 3 o'clock to sign off.
Greg, she texted me prior to leaving, and I'll tackle some of those comments at that time, at the round table. Anything for David? Ned, did that answer your question, sir?
It does. I think, unless there's objection, I think it would merit further conversation, maybe to have on our agenda for a future executive committee meeting. And I would say that probably needs to happen before August, just as if we wanted to schedule some sort of meeting with legislators, we'd have to be getting after them in August to start getting on their fall calendar. And we've been chastised that sometimes it's even too late to get, if they want to put something in action. So David may have to help us with the timing of that, but we don't want to have the conversation too late to miss the upcoming session, because my guess is the limitations will be off. So they'll be looking, I'm sure they'll be looking to add a lot of things they couldn't do this past year, but if we want a few things in the mix, we're going to have to be nimble in making that happen.
It would seem that if the regional summary chapter were put together with priorities, that in a timely enough manner to then come up with I think a subcommittee, and didn't we actually establish a subcommittee, or we talked about doing so, a legislating subcommittee that
It was determined that the executive committee would serve as the legislative.
Okay.
I couldn't remember if that was the.
So when it comes time to actually have the interface, there may be smarter people not on this call to do with this particular subject that should be added.
Are you volunteering for me to step out of there?
No, I'm volunteering for me to step out and let some more legislators be part of that discussion. But I really think that if we can come up with a series of recommendations out of the broader regional summary, that might put us in line with decent timing to do this this coming year, which does mean quickly. And if we can't do it well, then maybe it has to wait another year.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to volunteer if David could maybe be available to help guide me on timing, maybe conversations. I'd be happy to prep or be responsible for an agenda item at a future meeting if there's no objection from anybody else.
I think you just volunteered for it, Ned. Thank
And I would
you.
just say from a timing standpoint, I think, as Mr. Galloway said, it's very critical, particularly this year. I am anticipating that the General Assembly will be back in a special session sometime this summer. We're hearing July, and nothing's been set yet. And then, of course, with the House of Delegates, they're up for election in November. So they'll have other things on their mind, particularly from September on.
Any other questions from any other members for David?
Can I ask a staff-driven question on this one to make sure that I understand next steps? If the full partnership is meeting in June, is the goal to have something pulled together to put before the partnership in the June meeting?
That would be ideal.
And I would think based on the outline of that we just outlined, the timeline would have to be for June in order for us to get something in front of the legislators in time, I would think. I do have a couple of comments, but I just wanted to make sure everybody else had an opportunity to speak. Anybody else have something on their mind? So David, is there any other regional partnership like ours doing this, getting in front of the state folks? Would we be unique in that?
I really can't say. I don't run around housing issues as heavily as some other issues. So it may be that maybe in some of the the larger metropolitan areas, in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads and Richmond, that there is something like that, where they have an ongoing presence, maybe even at the General Assembly, or have developed some legislative positions. But I couldn't say for sure.
And then I guess I'll kind of have to be the chairperson in this. We specifically do not have a finance or budget agenda item here, and I just want to make it abundantly clear that if we do bring in David to help us, that's going to be some added cost or added budget items for 2022. I can't see everybody's face, but it looks like Christine is nodding yes. So I think we need to think that through a little bit about what that cost would be to this body. Because again, as a reminder, we only have $25,000 currently, and Ned and I have spoken this morning. We're going to get together and start working on a financial piece for our next executive committee meeting. But just to keep that in the back of everybody's mind, David will come out of cost, and we just need to make sure that we allot for that and find the funding for it. So thank you, David.
Keith, can I make another comment on your last? I think it was your question to David about our other regional housing bodies doing this work. It might be worth trying to connect with the Partnership for Housing Affordability in Richmond and asking, Laura Lafayette, our counterpart there, asking what they've done or they are doing related to this, just to see if, if we can learn from them in their process also.
My thinking was maybe there's a partnership there of some sort. Do they have the same issues that we have, and just to be more of a cohesive, larger body talking about, if we're all talking about the same subject matter or the same items that maybe are not specific to us, it might work out better as a team. Just a thought. All right. Any other questions for David before we cut him loose? Thanks, David. Appreciate your time. So we're running a little behind schedule because the chairman can't figure out what the day it is to have meetings. So thank you for everybody for picking up the slack. We're at the round table, and at the moment, the way my screen is set up, the first person I am looking at is Greg. And if Greg, if you could just share a little bit, I think I heard on the way driving over here, you shared some awesome stuff that you're doing in Fluvanna County, which obviously spurred up my ears and my interest. If you could share a little bit more about that, that would be great.
Yeah, I've been working with a religious-based, not-for-profit that's focused on affordable housing for a year, looking for a site, and I've mentioned it a couple of times. So we believe we have a site right next to Lake Monticello. We'll be building 120 senior affordable units, and the entire building they're targeting to be 60% AMI. I'm dying to see how we do that, and I'm not excited to see what my architectural budget will be for that.
Yeah.
And that's one of two religious organizations that we're dealing with, which is very encouraging. I'd made an editorial comment about impact, often eager to tell the various government jurisdictions what they should be doing, but not seeming to be doing much on their given subjects themselves. So it's very refreshing that two of the congregations within Charlottesville are both looking to step up to actually create affordable housing on property that they own, which I think could be a trend that we could see trying to extend to others. I think that, you know, sometimes they have additional land, and sites are always a challenge in the city and Albemarle County in particular. So it's an encouraging trend. I'm happy to be part of it with one of the two groups of in-towners. And then we're always happy that statewide groups start to take an interest and come in here to address the shortage as well.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. So looking at my screen, looks like Margaret, you are up next the way my screen is stacked.
I don't think I have anything new this month to say anything. We're still, working on the Renaissance Ridge project. It's at engineering right now. We haven't fully committed to it, and trying for some additional grants for that, but hopefully it'll work out because that'll mean some affordable units in Nelson County. And then other than that, we're just, keeping on.
So, Margaret, would you mind expanding a little bit on Renaissance Ridge? And I asked this from a very personal reason. I've had folks ask me about the project.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just give us like a 2-minute elevator speech on what the project is and number of units, that kind of thing?
Yep. So there's a parcel of land that is about 33 acres just north of Stony Creek on 151 that was hotly contested in the early 2000s. They were thinking about putting some timeshares in. The Wintergreen didn't want to do it. They sued the county. The county had allowed it. The county won. So it was added with some proffers to the Wintergreen property with the allowable density being, I think possibly 190 units on that 33 acres. It's been kind of sitting in limbo all those years, and you guys know Stu Armstrong. He's gotten together with some other people out there, organized as Renaissance Ridge, and brought the project to me and my board, and talked about how we could take that 33 acres and create a mixed income area with using, the prescribed density. Their plan is for no more than 150 units, single family homes, some multiplexes. It's going to be set up in it's being set up in 3 phases. The first, or each phase being, approximately 50 units. 30, minimum 30 being market rate, and as many as 20 being what we're calling workforce housing, and we're aiming for under 80% AMI. We have gotten a DHCD grant of $600,000 toward that. And we're going for a Virginia Housing grant for another $500,000. So it's we're, like I said, we're in development right now. We have a private grant to cover the costs that we have up till we can determine whether it's actually a feasible thing. So we're working with some engineers out of Stewart's Draft to do the traffic studies and do the water and the soil studies and all of that stuff. So when we're done with that in the next, I would say 4 weeks, we'll have a really good idea. Well, my board is going to have to vote to do it or not to do it. So that's where we stand right now. There is a little bit of objection in the wintergreen community. Some people are concerned about traffic. And of course, that's part of whatever engineering is doing. And there's concern about things. I think the most polite way to say it is culture clash. That people who are in the workforce may not understand how to live in a place like Stony Creek, but trying to combat that in all the ways that we're taught to combat it. So it's kind of exciting.
It's my understanding it's zoned though, that you're just going
Yes.
through site plan process,
That's
right? There is
correct.
no public process at this point. Okay.
No, but we are trying to be very open and, answer any questions. Stu's got some, he's doing some information sessions for the public. He's had one, I think there's about 75 people on it. And I can send you the other 2 dates if you're interested in attending, if you want to hear that. Okay. And yeah, it's like I said, it's pretty exciting if it really happens, because we'll be able to, as many as 60 units, affordable units, will be happy. And the grants would go toward soft second mortgages, helping them get solar in there so that their utilities are lower. So it's really trying to be thoughtful about everything.
Thank you, Morgan, for sharing. Thank you for bringing me up to speed, because I've heard a lot of information. I just figured I'd hear it from the person who's actually managing it. So thank you very much.
I have George is managing it from my perspective, and Stu's managing it. So I'm practicing my elevator speech. So
there you go. Well done. You did a well done job. Thank you very much. Ned, I think you're up next.
I don't have a whole lot. The board did pass the Fair Housing Month proclamation at our meeting last week. Keith was able to join us to accept that proclamation, which was great. The housing policy is going through the process to make its way back to the Planning Commission. And it occurs to me somebody updated those dates. Stacy, do you remember those dates off the top of your head? Because I think it's targeted to get back to us by July. Is that right?
So it goes to the Planning Commission next Tuesday, that's May 4th. And then if all goes well, we're tentatively scheduled to return to the board on June 16th.
June, not July. Couldn't remember. Thank you for that. And that it's interesting how that housing policy and how some constituents have been tying it to our form-based code decision at Rio that came to be those 2 nights. So that housing policy is going to dictate some things that occur in the form-based code. So interesting how those have kind of become tied together. But that's all I really have.
Thank you, Ned, and thank you for the shout out on the fair housing. I'm happy to report, as of this morning, all 6 jurisdictions of the MPO have adopted that proclamation. So that's a big thing, that all 6 jurisdictions are saying the same thing. So thank you for you and your board for doing that. Before I jump in, does any of the staff have anything to share?
I'll add one additional thing. I believe I've shared it with this executive committee before. I just wanted to let you guys know we're paying very close attention. DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, is developing a new grant program that they are hoping to distribute funds through planning district commissions. And that will be funding that is intended to be used for development of new affordable units. And so they're going to be asking the PDCs to kind of serve as the grant maker in that sense. Our planning district, based on our population size, would be eligible for up to $2 million. And it is a non-competitive grant track, meaning they have enough funding for all planning districts that apply to receive that funding. We're anticipating program guidance on that to be coming out somewhere in the first week or two of May, with a 30-day application timeline turnover. And then within 30 days being award notices going out. So it'll be a very quick turnover to develop a new program for the PDC. But as we learn information, I'll be sure to share that with you guys as broadly as possible. It's just brand new. I sat in one meeting through the VA PDC, the Virginia Planning District Commission Association, where DHCD came to talk to all of the directors. And then I sat in another focus group to give DHCD some feedback on what would make that funding easy to put out quickly, because they want it to be, a fairly quick turnaround in getting the funding out to the community. The funds would need to be used within, the units would need to be developed within 3 years of the grant funding being received. So I will let you guys know the more that I hear. They don't have any guidance up online or anything yet, but as soon as it is, I'll push that out to the full partnership and to our housing stakeholder email list. But just as an FYI, we will be developing an application and a new grant program to get some funding to develop units very soon.
Thank you. Stacy, anything to share from your perspective?
No, my only big news is I'm all housing policy right now, so.
There you go. You're doing this right.
I'm taking a break.
There you go. So from my perspective, I just wanted to share a little bit about the engagement committee, or the engagement event that's going to come out from UVA tomorrow. I'm part of as a chair of the Regional Housing Partnership, I'm part of this engagement team and an announcement. We dropped the Zoom registration link in the feed. I know Christine and staff has sent that out a couple of times. Please, this is all about getting involved, and they need your voice, and they're going to value your opinion. There's going to be, if you attend, there's going to be very similar to a Zoom meeting, where they're going to be polling questions where you can start making, for instance, one of the questions would be, which is a pretty question, is it a good thing for UVA to dedicate land for affordable housing, right? But there's going to be a series of questions and polling that will help formulate their consultants' plan moving forward. So I would encourage it. The reason I'm bringing this up is one is Colette asked me to do it. Secondly, I had a conversation with 2 city council members this morning that have not received this link. So please, in your sphere of influence, send it out to folks. Say, hey, if you're interested in this, please attend this. It's going to be I think a pretty good session on it. So that's kind of my soapbox speech on that. So please copy and paste it. Say, if you've got fellow members of whatever body that you're part of, hey, are you aware of this? Please text it out, email it, call them. The more engagement, the better the product will be. So other than that, I don't have anything else to share other than I will not delete apparently I deleted this meeting inadvertently. So I have my apologies. I will tell you, lunch was good though, for what it was worth. So that's all I have. Unless anybody else has anything, we can adjourn a few minutes early. Any further thoughts from anybody? Hearing none, thank you very much. We're going to adjourn. Ned, thank you for covering for me.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah.